I have a bit of a bone I want to pick with Canon. I just bought the T7i a little more than a month ago, and I've been enjoying it, but then... this. What's this? This is the SL2. Basically, the T7i, but smaller. I want a smaller camera, and $200 cheaper. I want a cheaper camera. Canon? Like, really? If I knew that was coming, I can promise you I could have survived with my old camera for a little bit longer. Now, there are some things that are a little bit better about the T7i, and I will go over those. But to be honest, it's hard to be that upset, because the T7i is a great camera. And here's why. I'm Titus. Welcome to the Search for Awesome, and this is the T7i review. Let's get one of the T7i's weaker aspects out of the way. It's plastic. Like, completely plastic. The buttons are squishy, not clicky, if that makes sense. If you were expecting a premium feeling camera, this isn't it. But the plastic is durable enough, and it does make the camera more lightweight, and I can live with that. There is metal on the lens ring, so there is metal where it counts. I would be very hesitant to buy this camera if the lens ring were plastic. Repeatedly taking off the lens would surely take a toll. You have one adjustment dial to make adjustments, which several of the more expensive Canon cameras have two for adjusting aperture and the shutter speed when in manual mode. But one adjustment dial is totally workable. It just defaults to shutter speed, and then if you hold down the AB button and scroll, it then changes aperture. It's really not that bad of a compromise. The software is a mixed bag. It's definitely tuned with photo in mind, and video is an afterthought with not as many options. For instance, there isn't any way to see audio levels on the screen, which is something my previous camera could do. The knob of options is confusing for video. Most of the options don't seem to do anything, which makes sense because most of its modes are related to photos. Even when you roll to a mode that does work for video, there isn't much of a visual indicator that the mode has changed. The only way you can tell you've changed modes in video is a very small icon that pops up in the top left corner, and some of the icons aren't exactly clear. Like, what is this? It's a camera with a speech bubble. What are you trying to say, Canon? Oh, it's filters. And why would I ever want to use filters again? Also, shutter priority and aperture priority don't work for video. From what I can tell, but it's entirely unclear, is they are auto modes that let me tinker with some of the settings like white balance where regular auto does not. In video mode, the camera just expects you to know what the camera is doing, without much information provided. The photo mode has a nice friendly UI with every mode switch, which is nice. And once you understand the camera, you can turn off this friendly mode if you find it gets in the way. I really wish it did this with video. As it is, it's just a bunch of guesswork trying to sort through all the options. It does have a quick menu for video, so people buying this camera for video aren't completely left out in the cold. This gives you quick access to a bunch of video options. Speaking of the mode knob, I remember looking at the Lumix GH5 and noticing it had a locking mechanism, so after locking the knob, you couldn't move it unless you unlocked it. I honestly thought that was overkill. I couldn't think of a time I changed a mode without meaning to on my previous cameras. But the T7i would have uniquely benefited from this feature. The on and off and video camera switches are literally attached to the mode knob. And it's super easy to accidentally brush the knob over a few clicks while turning the camera on. The first time I ran into this was at an aquarium. I brushed over the knob a few clicks into the scene mode where now my footage looks staticky and brown and tempting to replicate an old time effect. Which again, why is filters an option? I understand other camera companies do this, so I'm not picking on Canon, but why would I ever want my video of a majestic whale playing with this towel to look like it's about to get attacked by a cowboy? The footage produced on this camera is very high quality in my opinion. There isn't a 4K option, so you can only shoot 1080p up to 60 frames per second, but looking at it in retrospect made me wonder why I bought a 4K camera as one of my first cameras. It helped me realize more pixels doesn't always equate to better footage. There's something about the color and image produced from a Canon DSLR. It's really something special, and this goes for most of the Canon DSLRs. It just has an accurate realism while looking somewhat cinematic, all at the same time. I heard that Canon Color Science is really good, and many people try to get their non-Canon camera to look more like Canon by playing in the settings. I totally get it. This camera isn't as good as, let's say, a Red camera, but its video is just a cut above of a lot of the other competition in terms of quality. If you want to see some footage of the T7i for yourself, Well, look at that screen in front of you. It's that bright thing you're looking at. And keep in mind, most of this footage was run and gun. I didn't have much time to compose shots or anything like that. Also, this is just the default settings with one minor change. I have the white balance set to Auto W, and that does a pretty good job for me. If you want more footage, what you're seeing is footage from a vlog I made with my wife's family going to several awesome landmarks out west. Zion National Park, Hoover Dam, Bryce Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, Vegas. I'll have a link to that vlog at the end of this video and in the description. These are just some of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen, and I'm so glad I got to bring this camera there to capture it. We even went to Antelope Canyon, but I wasn't allowed to record video there. But I got pictures. Each of these were taken with the T7i and my wide angle lens, if you're curious. I wasn't planning on talking about photo quality because I'm not a pro photographer, but I have to say for a non-pro camera, I'm really happy with these shots. If you're curious, a raw image from the T7i takes up about 30 megabytes each, so each gigabyte of your memory card can only take about 30 pictures. So get a beefy memory card if you want to take a lot of these raw pictures. You can always take JPEG pictures, which are much smaller file sizes, but that's lame and you're lame for thinking of doing that. I'm just joking, you're awesome! JPEGs still look fine, and they're a good option if you're running out of space. One thing that sets Canon apart is their lenses. There are a lot of them, and there are several that are very budget friendly. To put things in perspective, I bought my previous camera's lens for about $700. And when new, that lens was about $1,000. That's not out of the norm for a Panasonic or Sony lens, but Canon has several lens options that are much cheaper. I was able to grab a wide angle lens for about $280 that's good for vlogging and getting wide shots. I also got a 50mm 1.8, which is good for closer shots with nice bokeh for about $100. This is one reason why I think Canon is a great brand for beginners and hobbyists. Sure, these lenses, like the T7i itself, are mostly plastic, and a lot of these expensive lenses from the competition are just metal. But the images from these cheaper lenses are still great, and they're significantly cheaper, and they're lighter. And also, I don't need my lens to survive a nuclear blast, so completely metal is a little overkill for me. Plastic is still plenty durable, and I get to pocket these savings for more lenses. Or maybe some ice cream. This isn't to say that Canon doesn't have expensive lenses. They got plenty. Now let's talk about the battery life. I was about to criticize Canon pretty hard here. Not because their battery life isn't good. I found the battery life to be great. I just had one battery out west using my camera on and off for pictures and video over the course of 2 weeks, and as long as I charged it each night, one battery was plenty to survive the day. Now, I was consciously turning the camera off when not in use, but I was really impressed, no issues here. No, what I was going to give them a hard time about was their position on third-party batteries. Many people have reported on several of their previous camera models that Canon would pop up warnings for using a non-Canon battery. From what I understand, you could still use the camera with an off-brand battery, but every single time you would turn the camera on, you had to deal with this warning before you could actually put the camera to use. Now you might be thinking, oh that's fine, I'll just buy a Canon battery. But a battery from Canon is, get this, $70, and that's just one additional battery. A good third-party battery could be as cheap as less than $30, and you get another battery and an additional charger. There is great news here though. This doesn't appear to be the case with the T7i. Actually, I may be getting ahead of myself. It's not quite that simple. Some people are reporting that some third-party batteries have issues with the T7i, but I found a particular third-party battery that actually works. And here it is, link in the description. I don't know the full story here, like if Canon is allowing certain third parties to make batteries for their cameras, if third parties are finding workarounds, or if somehow this one slipped by Canon. I honestly don't know, but I can confirm personally that there are no issues with battery levels showing and everything works just like a Canon battery. The T7i has dual pixel autofocus for video, which is a big deal for me because I'm a one-man band. I can't always check to make sure my camera kept focused properly, and my previous camera, the Panasonic Lumix G7, kinda stunk. If you watch some of my previous videos, you'll know that I've had issues with my Panasonic G7's autofocusing system just not being reliable. I've had multiple times where in editing I found out the camera changed focus in the middle of recording, ruining footage. So I tried the Panasonic GH5, which was much pricier and was supposed to have a much better autofocusing system, but I found that not to be true. The autofocus was slightly better, but only slightly. This is why I decided to try a Canon camera with dual pixel. I heard it was a much better system and the rumors were absolutely true. Dual pixel autofocus is fantastic. Almost every time it gets the focus perfect. It's also pretty smart. In any given image, there are dozens of things the camera could focus on, and it does a great job of figuring out the right thing to lock onto. Here's an example of a more difficult situation in pretty low lighting. I wanted to show a close-up of this burger I had at In-N-Out during a vlog. Now at first it didn't catch, so I brought it a little closer to the center and boom! It was in perfect focus. I didn't have to push any buttons or wave it around or anything. It's just smart. It's truly an impressive piece of tech. One feature I am missing from the Lumix G7 was the ability to lock focus and color balance with the push of a button. That feature is really nice when you have a shot you like and you don't want the camera to go schizophrenic and change the focus or color of your shot while filming. Unfortunately, the T7i doesn't have this feature to my knowledge, but you can lock your focus if need be. You do this by using the autofocus, and once you have your shot in proper focus, just flip the switch, changing the camera to manual focus on the lens itself. The smartphone app works as expected. There is a bit of a latency, but it works with photo and video alike. Once you go through the setup, you can download images and video off the camera or completely control the camera via your smartphone flawlessly. The only thing the smartphone can't control is the mode your camera is in. Oddly, you still have to switch that manually using the mode knob on the camera. But once you do that, the app screen updates and allows you to use the newly selected mode. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this, but coming from a mirrorless camera, I assumed the T7i's viewfinder would work for video. On my G7, this was great because if it was bright outside and I was trying to record something, I could still get the shot even if my LCD screen was completely washed out from the bright sun. That's because mirrorless cameras use a digital viewfinder, but DSLRs like the T7i don't. Theirs are optical. Needless to say, I'm disappointed, but to be fair, the optical viewfinders are much more crisp than the digital option, but the downside is they can only be used with photos. There is good news though. The LCD screen is really bright and very visible to the eye, even in bright sunlight, so I don't feel like the camera is useless even on a bright, sunny day. I can say that confidently, and I don't even use my LCD screen at the brightest setting. One of the things I was concerned with when purchasing this camera were the preamps. If you don't know what that is, a preamp is the thing in the camera that works with an external microphone and greatly impacts audio quality. Basically, if you have good preamps, sound recorded is clear and crisp. If you have bad preamps, sound is staticky and possibly filled with what I would call white noise. It can even sound unnatural and digital or robotic. You can sometimes make up for not having great preamps by having a microphone that has a battery boosting the signal, but I don't have that. I have a Rode Video Micro, which is totally dependent on the preamp for powering the microphone. The good news is the T7i's preamps are good. And here's what they sound like. This is a test with a T7i with the Rode Video Micro, so you can actually get to hear what the preamps sound like with a microphone plugged in. My previous camera, the G7, had great preamps, and here's what they sound like in that same area. And this is a test of the Lumix G7 with the Rode Video Micro, so you can hear the preamps from this one. I personally think the preamps from this one is actually better than the T7i, but just a little bit. I personally think the T7i's preamps are fine, but not quite as good as my old cameras. It's close though, but please feel free to decide for yourself. I said I would talk about the differences between the SL2 and the T7i and further explain why the SL2 is a better deal, so let's do that for a bit. Neither the T7i or the SL2 are waterproof, so if you need that, you might want to go for an 80D. Also, neither record over 30 minutes of footage at a time, not due to overheating though. The rumor is it's something to do with taxes in Europe. But I don't live in Europe, like most of the people in the world, so why is this limit here? To be fair, other camera companies do this 30-minute limit as well, but it's still annoying nonetheless. They both have flip-out screens, which is why I considered this camera over some of the other cameras. These cameras have the same sensor and same processor, so the picture quality and overall zippiness of the camera should be very similar. And you'd think with the same processor, they should have identical features, but no. This is where the T7i starts to separate itself from its little brother. If you're really wanting this for photography, the T7i can shoot up to 6 frames per second, while the SL2 can only shoot up to 5. Also, the SL2 has 9 autofocus points for photos versus the T7i's 45. Literally, it's 5 times as many, so I imagine autofocusing for photos on the SL2 might be a bit slower. To be clear though, the video autofocus should be identical because they both use the same dual pixel system for that. The T7i can record HDR video, which is a really neat feature, but I'm not really sure if this is true HDR. Maybe you need an HDR display to appreciate this, which I don't have, but I thought this would be at least a little different, brighter, more contrast. more colorful. Seriously, something. I tried pulling the files in Final Cut and playing with the colors to see if I could maybe have more control of the colors or something. Nope, it was about the same there too. Even the file sizes were roughly the same size. All I did notice that was different was the dark trees had some noise in them due to the higher frame rate it uses to get the HDR image. I did try a portrait with the sun at my side with the shadows on the right side of my face, and I sort of see some differences here. The shadows from the HDR are much less defined and the white side is brighter, I think? You know what, just take my HDR opinion with a grain of salt. I am not an HDR expert by any stretch. One more weird note, you can only record HDR in 30 frames per second. It's a little bizarre. Why no 24 frames per second option? Okay, I'm done. Another thing that T7i one-ups the SL2 with is movie digital image stabilization. Basically, it's a way using software the camera can reduce shakes and jitters if you're not holding it perfectly still. I talked about this feature in my unboxing of the T7i, but I never got to test it. So I did some vlogging tests where I held the camera and walked at a steady pace. There are 3 options for this feature: active, enabled, or you can leave it off entirely. Active being the most extreme image stabilization, enabled being a more mild version. Also, the lens I'm using here is wide angle and has optical image stabilization built in, so the lens itself is reducing the shakes and jitters along with the digital image stabilization. You'll notice active mode is zoomed in quite a bit. That's because that is how the digital stabilization works. It zooms in the image a bit to give the camera a bit of a margin of error, and it uses that to smooth out the shakes and jitters. In this experiment, I can see slight improvements using enabled. You can especially notice it if you look at the rails of the bridge, but it's not night and day improvement, more like dusk and dawn. But for this test, active doesn't offer much of an improvement on top of that, if any, and it's really zoomed in for this type of shot. And looking at this footage right now, I'm not really sure what was going on, because I wasn't annoyed, but my face apparently didn't know that. My apologies. For the next test, I changed my lens to my 50mm 1.8, and what's interesting about this lens is it doesn't have optical image stabilization. So with the T7i, I can use the digital stabilization to stabilize the footage from a lens that doesn't even traditionally have stabilization. Cool. That is a sweet side benefit that hadn't even occurred to me until this test. For this test, I'm just trying to control the camera handheld to keep this sign in the center of the frame. 50mm is fairly zoomed in, so this isn't as easy as it might sound. I feel like with this test, you can see more of an advantage to this digital stabilization. The footage from both enabled and active significantly reduces the shakes. Active almost looks like the camera is on a tripod. This is really impressive stabilization, but for my uses, to be honest, I don't think this digital stabilization feature justifies the extra $200 cost of the T7i. I can just use a tripod if I need something this stable, but for vlogs, it's a slight improvement, but only slight. Also, I don't know if the SL2 does this, but the T7i offers digital zoom, which is an evil word to most camera lovers, but in this case, it's okay. This is because even with a 3x zoom, you're still getting a real 1080p image because the sensor has so many more pixels than is needed for 1080p. You can push the zoom further up to 10x, but never do that. I would just stick with 3x. This is really cool because just like with digital image stabilization, you can add zoom to a lens that doesn't have zoom. I have a wide angle lens with barely any zoom I use when I'm out and about, and with this feature, it can take that 18mm zoom and take it essentially to 56mm, which is a decent zoom. A few things though. Because you're only using a part of the sensor versus the whole thing, the quality of the footage isn't quite as good. Also, there isn't any middle option before you get to the 3x zoom. A 1.5x, a 2x, or a 2.5x zoom would be nice here, but it's either no digital zoom or wha-bam, 3x. The T7i also has a time-lapse feature where the SL2 does not. It works, but it's not in a convenient location in the UI. It's in the menu, which other cameras do as well, but wouldn't it be better as a mode on top of the camera in the mode wheel? Just a thought. It allows you to set your timing between shots and the amount of shots along with a few other settings, and then it just goes. It even lets you know how long the time lapse will take. It does a pretty nice job too. While I love the overall quality and color with some shots being spectacular, I do notice some odd pixely compression in some of the minor details in some clips. Like in this shot, the leaves just look sort of fuzzy and not crisp. I want to say this is an aliasing issue, but it could also be the bitrate. I'm not completely sure. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this in this video because it's minor and YouTube compresses the videos, but I can assure you it's there. If you want to capture something with a lot of small, slight details on video, just know you might run into this issue. It would be cool if Canon could fix this, but who knows if it's possible. In conclusion, this is the good enough camera. In some aspects, it excels, like with the footage quality and overall color. But it has weaknesses with its build quality and lack of 4K. But at the end of the day, I can almost wholeheartedly recommend this camera. Except I have to recommend the SL2 because it's smaller and cheaper and basically the same camera. But to be fair, I haven't used the SL2, so I'm basing that opinion solely on a spec sheet. Maybe you can use that savings to buy some extra lenses or some ice cream. For me, if I could build a time machine and go back, I would get a ton of Google stock, ride a woolly mammoth, and purchase the Canon SL2. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. I can't return the T7i, so all of my videos for the foreseeable future will be recorded on the T7i. So please subscribe so you don't miss any reviews or other cool content coming down the pipe. If nothing else, you can see what I'm doing with my T7i. If you're looking for more on this camera, here is the vlog that I referenced earlier, almost completely recorded with the T7i. The first few seconds were on my phone camera, but everything else was on this. Or here is the unboxing I did of the T7i a while back. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.